Hi, fifth grade. Today we're going to read a story called Salt in His Shoes. It is by Dolores Jordan with Rosalind M. Jordan, illustrated by Kadir Nelson. Let's see if you can figure out who the main character is in this story. So before we read today, I want you to think about story structure. When we think about story structure, we think about the who, or our characters in our stories. We think about where or when the story is taking place. That's called the setting. And then we think about the important events in a story, and that we call the plot. Okay? And typically our fictional stories have a beginning, middle, and end. The beginning hooks the reader. It describes the main character, and it will describe the setting right off the bat. Eventually, we find that the main character has a problem, and that would be the conflict or the issue with the main character. By the end, we have, hopefully, the main character finds a resolution to their problem. Okay, so let's see if you can figure out who the main character is in this story. It is a famous athlete, so let's see if you can figure out who the famous athlete is in this story. Michael loved to play basketball. Every Saturday, he followed his older brothers, Larry and Ronnie, to the park, hoping that they would let him play. And if one of the guys who usually played with them didn't show, they always did. But there was one problem. His name was Mark, and he was the tallest boy on the court. So far we've learned that Michael is our main character. We've learned that the setting is the basketball court. And we've also learned his problem. His biggest problem, right now anyway, is Mark, the tallest boy on the court. So if I were to have to guess, this would be Michael and this would be Mark, because Mark looks pretty big. "What's the matter, Mikey? Too short?" Mark flapped his arms in Michael's face. "Over here," shouted Larry. But when Michael threw the ball, Mark's long arms came out of nowhere and knocked the ball away. It flew into the hands of a player on Mark's team. He made the basket, and the game was over, just like that. How do you think Michael was feeling? A little defeated? We can use the pictures as clues here. It looks like he was saying how his brothers play basketball with him. His brothers must be older than him, and it's looking like they're trying to comfort him from the illustrations here. "I'm really sorry, guys. If I were taller, that wouldn't have happened." All the way home, Michael apologized, even though no one was mad at him. His oldest brother, Ronnie, tried to cheer him up. "Look, little brother, you played good today. Don't worry, we'll win the next time." So it sounds like he has another problem. He's also worried about how tall he was. He's saying, if I were taller, that wouldn't have happened. Based off of the pictures, I can tell that this is not a story that's taking place in present time, because men don't typically wear shorts that are that short anymore. When they got home, Michael went into the kitchen where Mama was cooking dinner. He was still disappointed, and she could tell. "You guys lost again today, huh?" Michael nodded. He sat quietly for a minute and then said, "Mama, how can I grow taller?" Now, Mama knew the answer to a lot of questions, but this was a tough one. She thought for a moment as she sprinkled salt and pepper on the chicken she was making for dinner. Then she smiled, looked at Michael, and said, "Salt." "Salt?" Michael looked at his mama. "Salt in your shoes. We'll put salt in your shoes and say a prayer every night, and before you know it, you'll be taller," she replied. So that's where we got the title, Salt in His Shoes. Any ideas on who this Michael is that plays basketball? He would have grown up probably in like 70s or 80s. "Salt in my shoes," Michael said quietly to himself. Surely Mama was teasing. He sat staring out of the window, trying to figure out how salt was going to help him. He noticed the rose bushes outside Mama's garden. They had grown high along the fence, and roses of all colors were blooming on the vines. He thought to himself, I remember when Mama first planted those bushes. Michael's face lit up. If Mama knew how to make those rose bushes grow taller, then maybe she's right. Maybe salt in my shoes really would help me grow. Growing more excited, Michael twirled around and around and started asking lots of questions. Mama, how long will it take? And how tall do you think I'll get? Smiling, Mama sat down next to him and explained. In order for this to work, the most important things you have to do are be patient and listen to what I tell you, and say your prayers every night. Listening carefully, Michael shook his head. Okay, Mama, I'll be patient, but what does saying my prayers have to do with it? Everything, Mama replied, and she hugged him. Now go wash up and tell your brothers and sisters to get ready for dinner. Michael dashed out of the kitchen, almost knocking over his father, who was walking in. What's he up to now? Asked Daddy. Oh, the usual, laughed Mama. Chasing a dream. Later during dinner, Mama noticed that Michael was barely eating anything. He was already daydreaming about being taller. Do you think this is going to solve his problem of being taller, the salt in his shoes? Michael, first things first, you won't grow if you don't eat, especially your vegetables, Mama said. But I'm not really hungry, he said. Raising her eyebrows, Mama gave him the look. Slowly, Michael picked up his fork and began to eat. Minutes later, his plate was clean and he was asking for more. That evening at bedtime, Michael set his favorite game shoes on the floor next to his growth chart hanging on the wall. Then he put on his pajamas, said his prayers, and jumped into bed. So far, our main character is still Michael. His mom seems to be playing a pretty important part in the story. What would be his mom's important part in the story as a character? What words would you use to describe her character traits? Caring, kind, helpful, creative, coming up with salt in the shoes. When Mama came in, Michael was fast asleep. By the look on his face, she could tell he was already playing basketball in his dreams. Standing by his bed, Mama sprinkled salt in his shoes. Please help Michael to be the best he can be and to give all his best in all that he does. And could you please make him just a little bit taller today than he is tomorrow than he is today? Thank you. After that night, Michael wore his favorite game shoes everywhere he went, even to church. Can you see him there in the pews with his sneakers on? And he stopped going to the park with his brothers on Saturdays. Instead, he stayed home and practiced. He wanted to grow a few more inches before he went back to the park. Do you think the salt's working? So I would say Michael's very determined. After 2 months of practicing and waiting patiently, Michael stood next to the growth chart on his wall. Nothing. He hadn't grown an inch. He was disappointed, but he did not stop believing. I've just got to give it time, like Mama said, Michael thought to himself, and that's what he did. 2 more months of practicing went by and still nothing. Now Michael was becoming a little sad. Do you think it's normal for him to feel discouraged at this point? It's been 2 months and he still hasn't grown. Now Michael was becoming a little sad. Not only had he not grown 1 inch, but he also missed playing basketball with Larry and Ronnie. About the only thing he didn't miss was being picked on by, do you remember? Mark. When the next Saturday came, his brothers tried to get Michael to go with them to the park, but he wouldn't budge. Mama had begun to worry. When she saw Michael sitting alone on the steps, she said to Daddy, maybe you should go out and talk to him. So Daddy went out and sat with Michael. What's wrong, son? You haven't got to the park with your brothers for a while now. Are you okay? Michael didn't say anything at first. Then he looked at Daddy and said, I thought I would at least be a few inches taller by now. I did everything Mama told me to do, but nothing's happening. Michael, why do you want to be taller? Daddy asked. If I were taller, I'd be a great player, and I could help our team win, Michael answered. Still any clues? Have you guys figured out who Michael is? A famous basketball player. Some boys should be able to help us out here. But you are a great player, son, and you already have everything it takes to be a winner right in here. Daddy tapped Michael on his chest. Being taller may help you play a little better, but not as much as practice, determination, and getting your best will. Those are the things that make you a real winner. Michael thought about what Daddy said for a minute. Then suddenly he jumped up and took off. "Where are you going?" Daddy yelled after him. "I've got a game today, and I'm late," Michael yelled back. Any predictions what might happen next? Do you think he'll get to play in the game? Do you think they'll win? Do you think he'll stand up to Mark? Are all his problems going to be solved in one basketball game? When Michael reached the park, the game had started. He sat on the bench, hoping he would get a chance to play. And he did. The game was almost over and the score was tied when John, one of the guys on Michael's team, fell and hurt himself. Here was Michael's chance. Michael joined his team in the huddle as they gathered on the sideline for a timeout. "Okay, the game is tied. All we need is 1 point. Who wants to take the shot?" Ronnie asked. He looked in Michael's direction. Feeling more confident than ever, Michael said, "I'll do it." I hope it's a happy ending. When the whistle blew and the game began, Mark began to pick on Michael as usual. "Still trying to play with the big boys, huh?" Mark said. But Michael paid him no attention. Taller or not, he had been practicing, and today he was determined to win. Do you see how he's looking like, "I can do this"? He's feeling very confident. He's been practicing, and it's like his dad said, he's determined. Larry threw the ball inbounds to Michael. Michael caught it, bounced it for a moment, then took off running. I don't see Mark anywhere. There's Mark. As he approached Mark, Michael shifted to his right. Mark followed, but while he was still shifting, Michael spun to his left. He stepped behind Mark and shot. The ball arced far above his opponent's hands and fell silently through the hoop. 2 points. The game was over. Michael's team had won. It was just as Michael had dreamed. When he realized what he had done, Michael took off running and didn't stop until he had reached home. Bursting through the door, he shouted, "I did it, Daddy, I did it. I shot right over the tall guy's head, and we won the game." Running in behind him, Ronnie and Larry joined in the celebration. "That's right, little brother, you did it. You won the game for us." Michael remembered the look that Ronnie gave him during the last time out of the game and said, "No, we won the game, but I was the star." They all laughed. After that day, Mama stopped putting salt in Michael's shoes, but Michael did not stop being patient, working hard, and praying. So that must be what made Michael grow up to be a 6'6" tall basketball superstar. So some of the clues, his sisters actually were the authors of the book. So this is Michael Jordan, if you aren't noticing from the picture. Okay. So could we identify the characters, the setting, and the plot of this story? Going back, let's think of some of the important characters. I would say would be Michael, his mom, maybe his dad. Mark's an important character. He's like the villain of the story. He's the bad guy. He's the one that's picking on Michael. And Michael's character traits or his personality shines through. He's determined. He doesn't give up. And he does actually defeat Mark in the end. So our characters are important and their traits are important as well. The setting would be the basketball court or his house. And the plot meaning or being that Michael wanted to solve this problem of getting taller, but really his problem was being confident and enough to play basketball and defeat Mark or his opponents. And in the end, when he grew as a character and became confident and determined and proud of himself and felt comfortable, he was able to do really a great job on the basketball court. So that would be the lesson learned here is determination. I hope you enjoyed this story. This week we're going to read the story Frindle, and you're going to pick out the story elements of that story. So again, we're going to look for the characters or the who, the setting, which is where and when the story takes place, to the time period. Again, I told you, this book's about Michael Jordan, so it's not like he's not a boy in 2020, okay? He was a boy in the 80s. So the time and the place is the setting, and then our plot would be the events that are happening in the story, okay? So I am excited to start the book friend with you this week, and I hope you enjoyed the story, Salt in His Shoes.